Before the war, one and the same low-power airplanes could be meant for training, sport, and general purposes. After the war, all such machines required division into separate classes. For training airplanes, it was always important to have such qualities as stability and controllability, correcting even rough mistakes at piloting. The need of them after the war even increased. Relations between the countries which defeated fascism began to worsen. Arms race went on another loop. At that time, Yak-11 combat trainer was used to prepare military pilots. It was based on one of the best wartime piston engine fighters, Yak-3. No doubt that Yak-11 was perfect. After mastering Yak-11, transition to a fighter was easy. However, Yak-11 was not an airplane for primary training, which was in great need. Having refurbished the pre-war UT-2, Alexander Yakovlev started to make the new UT-2L. Although it could hardly be called new. The landing gear was fixed and the layout had mostly wooden parts. In the beginning of the war, USSR suffered shortages in aluminum, but for 1945 a wooden airplane was of course an anachronism. UT-2L was not produced. Thereafter, there appeared an all-metal Yak-18. It had all the qualities of an airplane of such designation, simple in operation, solid and reliable. It had signs of the new times as well: closed cockpit, retractable landing gear and a radio station. In the course of its service, Yakovlev kept on updating the airplane. The most successful modification, Yak-18A, resulted from installation of a new M14 engine. The 1.5 times increase in power gave the airplane absolutely new flight quality. All new machines by that time were equipped with a nose wheel. This made the airplane ground driving simpler. Yak-18A had such a wheel. Yak-18 production of different modifications amounted to 7,000. Throughout dozens of years, this airplane was used in the military and civil aviation schools and sports air clubs. Yak-18 obtained its substitution only in 1974 when Yakovlev's design bureau made a new training machine, Yak-52. This machine was of course a product of its time and radically differed from its predecessors, although increased capabilities resulted in the high price. The two-seat Yak-52 was rather expensive for primary training, but at that time money was not much counted. Basically, Yakovlev always followed the rule of making two variants on a unified basis, a one-seat and a two-seat airplane. Anything could change in the pilot's training except the main principle, from simple to complex. First with instructor on a two-seat machine and then on a one-seat to improve the skills. Besides, the one-seat version was best of all for aerobatics. It was preferable for the machines of this category to have minimum maneuver margin, which means that control becomes very sensitive and machine responds to a minimum stick movement. Good maneuverability is no less important. Machines with such qualities were made only for those who had reached a certain piloting level. Such airplane was designated for aggressive aerobatics. Therefore, it was important for the layout to sustain huge G-load. The beauty of aerobatics, not least of all, depends on the harmonic outlines of the airplane. A special aerobatic airplane appeared in 1959. It was made on the basis of Yak-18 and was defined as Yak-18P. Its systems were worked out in such a way that even in an upside-down flight, the fuel and oil supply of the engine was uninterruptible. Despite its minor dimensions, the machine was tested seriously. Yak-18P was tested by the well-known test pilot Sergei Anokhin. Such attention to aerobatic machines was not accidental. Aerobatic World Championships started to take place from 1960, and Soviet pilots took active part in them. After the Stalin's death, the country felt more free and produced a number of records. It was important to be the first everywhere, including sport. The first performance in 1960 was not outstanding, but on the next championship, the Soviet team was second. 2 years later, it won the Nesterev Cup. The pilot's skills were developing, so were the machine's capabilities. Following Yak-18P, there came Yak-18PM with a more powerful engine and a wider range of admissible G-loads. For better observation, the cockpit was moved backward. Already in 1966, all the leading places were occupied by the Soviet pilots. Vladimir Martimyanov and Galina Korchuganova became champions. In 1968, competitors progressed and Germans became champions. They performed on an aerobatic airplane of the Czech Zlin company. Its history started way back in the 30s, and it was steeped in airplane building traditions. The Zlin company built a number of minor airplanes which were used for training and successfully participated in competition. The best of its airplanes was Zlin 50, which was made exclusively for aerobatics. Another claimant of the aerobatic crown was the American Pitts Special biplane. It had minor dimensions, small weight, and respectable power reserve. Pitts Special could roll in the air like a thrown matchbox. The bad thing was that the referees were unable to see what was this small airplane doing up in the sky. So the Yakovlev's machine had all chances for success. In 1970, there appeared Yak-18PS, a lightweight machine as compared with the predecessors. 2 years later, there came Yak-50 aerobatic airplane, the top of the Yak-18 family. Since that time, practically all wins at the World and European Championships belonged to Soviet pilots. Aerobatics requires readiness, endurance, and self-control from the pilot. But that is not all. Spectators may think that the airplane is flying in a boundless space, but the size of the air stage is strictly limited. In order to perform all program elements within the narrow limits, the pilot needs perfect coordination, instant reaction, and a bit of sports luck. That's how it was before, that's how it is now. Conditions of the pilot's performance have not changed, while the airplanes made a huge step forward. A one-seat aerobatic Yak-55 airplane first took off in 1982. Everything in the new airplane was made to reach maximum maneuverability. A symmetrical profile wing was applied. In other words, there was no difference in piloting whether the airplane was flying in a normal or an upside-down position. Performance mostly depended on the pilot. While previous aerobatic yaks grew from training airplanes, Yak 55 was a sports airplane of a new generation. Not long before that, the Yakovlev's monopoly in sports airplanes production was slightly disturbed by the Students' Design Bureau of the Moscow Aviation Institute. The students made Kvant airplane took off in 1977. Its size and form were ideal for the aerobatic geometry, and all it did in the sky looked very harmonically from the ground. The Kvant's proportions later became classical and made the basis for many sports airplanes built later. In 1992, the same institute made another aerobatic machine, Aviatica 900. The students' layout was peculiar for a lot of new, non-standard engineering and technological solutions. Attempts of the Students' Design Bureau were not considered as anything serious. The Yakovlev's monopoly ended up only when the sports topic was undertaken by the Sukhoi Design Bureau, which used to make only military aircraft. The history of the Su-26 sports aerobatic airplane was not simple. Designer Vyacheslav Kondratyev first elaborated on the Su-26 layout when he worked in the Yakovlev's Design Bureau. He then had to leave, and works continued in the Sukhoi team. Thus, in 1984, an aerobatic airplane appeared under the brand of Su-26, which gave birth to the world-renowned family. Conditions for the airplane's creation and improvement were principally new. Designers were diligently inquiring the sports pilots how the airplane should be done in order to have advantage over other machines at the competition. In other words, the tool for the achievements was made upon a special order of the sport pilots. This virtually resulted in the Su-26's enormous success. Any trifle was taken into account, for example, how the step at the cockpit entrance is made, or how the controls are located on the panel. That's what the sport of high achievement means. Even unimportant details become significant. Since 1986, practically all medals and prizes at the championships were won by the Soviet and later by the Russian pilot. The Su-26 potential was so big that the foreign aircraft of the same class appearing later were inferior. The airplane was being constantly modified. The next family member was a two-seat Su-29. Its first takeoff was in 1991. Since aerobatics related to extreme types of sport, designers thought of equipping airplanes with a pilot rescue system. A standard ejection seat, due to the airplane's minor dimensions, did not fit. Thus, an interesting escape system was invented. An extending bar was picking up the pilot out of the cockpit. Another family member was Su-31, a one-seat variant of Su-29. The new identification resulted from a lot of novelties added to the basic layout. Practically all systems were improved. The Su-26 family members demonstrate their outstanding characteristics around the world. Nobody can stay indifferent watching what they can do. Airplanes of the Sukhoi Design Bureau firmly put pressure on their competitors in the sphere of sports aviation. However, Yakovlev's designers did not sit on their hands. In 1993, following long-lasting traditions, the Yakovlev's team made a two-seat aerobatic airplane Yak-54. By the time of its appearance, Russia entered the world society. Wider export possibilities were open. That's when the Yak-54 low price became significant. The airplane obtained good export perspective.